Welcome to another episode of On the Record. Today we are sitting with the amazing Nashville guitar player Pat Bergeson. Pat, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. This is
Thanks.
awesome.
Thanks, Cody. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So, for those of you who are just coming to the channel, this interview series focuses on the music business and music professionalism, and we talk to guys who have found success in the industry. And Pat Bergeson, you are definitely one of those people. So, thank you so much, and let's just dive right in.
All right.
Usually, I like to start these interviews by talking to professional musicians about what a normal workday looks like for them as a musician for two reasons. The first reason is I think it's important for people to see that professional musicians don't wake up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and go play a gig and go home. There's a lot more behind the scenes that happens. But two, I always like to learn about whether people have a practice routine or some kind of, how you keep your chops up. So let's just kind of start there and go from here.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I double on harmonica,
Right.
and so, um, on a regular day, I particularly don't have like a routine
Sure.
on my regular day. I like doing a lot of things also besides music.
Right.
Of course, so, I like
Yeah.
to fish and, hike and be
You and me both.
outdoors and,
Yeah.
and I practice harmonica in the car.
Mm-hmm.
So I spend a lot of time driving on country roads, playing harmonica.
Sure.
And that's
Okay.
where,
Yeah.
and I play a diatonic harmonica. So I'm like, okay, well, I think today I'll practice playing, in A on a C harmonica,
That's got to be pretty inspirational.
or
Yeah.
G flat on
Yeah.
a C harmonica. Yeah, so I've always got something to do,
Yeah.
to keep me working on music.
Sure. Yeah.
The harmonica's been great for me that way. And, but I don't really have a regular routine.
Okay.
So usually, there's a guitar lying around,
Mm-hmm.
and if I've got time during the day, I'll pick up the guitar and I just start playing.
Sure.
I just
Yeah.
start noodling and
Yeah.
practicing, soloing on rhythm changes or a jazz standard or just playing funk rhythm
Whatever
guitar
comes
or
to
like
you.
whatever comes to
Yeah.
me.
Sure.
And so usually that's what it is. And then there's times when I'll really get inspired and want to spend a lot of time practicing days at a time, where I'll
Okay.
just be like just eaten up with wanting to practice. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
a lot of that really just feels like working out for me. I'll
Yeah.
usually always with a metronome or a drum machine
Great.
or use the
Yeah.
Drum Genius app on my phone or
Uh-huh.
something and set
Yeah.
it to some groove, and then I'll bump up the tempo slowly, things like that,
Yeah.
And occasionally I'll, brush up on scales and chord voicings and intervals on the guitar. A lot of the things that I teach students to when I do teach, I'll teach them stuff like that, and try to do the same thing myself, because it's kind of thing where as being a guitar
Right.
player, it's
Yeah.
never ending, right? What
No,
you're
right.
working on.
Right.
So yeah, so on a regular day, yeah, there's really no regular day for me.
Okay.
I would say,
Okay.
but I'm always trying to play, uh, at least an hour a day,
Okay.
or and then days go by when I don't play at all. But
Sure.
I know if I'm going to have to go out and do a gig,
Right.
I definitely want to play for an hour or so before
Yeah.
I go to a gig if I get time.
Sure.
Just to kind of get. I really think it's more your brain than your hands for
Yeah.
me.
Okay.
I mean, the older you get, maybe the less nimble you become to some degree, I think, but really it's your brain that has to stay sharp.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing that you're exercising. Really,
Mhm.
it's not your hands, it's your
Right.
brain. And so once you kind of get the juices flowing in your mind, then things just start coming at you,
Sure.
new ideas and
Sure.
new licks, and how that feels.
Oh,
where
yeah,
it's just
yeah.
coming at you like from
Definitely.
almost outside of yourself, so
Yeah.
yeah, so that's kind of what it's
Well,
like
cool.
for me.
Well, you said something at the end there that I have a question about later. But since we're on it, let's just jump to that question
Sure.
and we'll get back on track. You said exercising your brain and kind of the way that you think about music. And I wanted to ask you about that because you're known for a lot of things, right? You're known you double on harmonica and guitar. But I think that when I think of Pat Bergeson, when I think of you, you are known especially for your amazing improv on the guitar. Your improvisational skills when you're soloing is always on point. And I wanted to ask you kind of if you if you have a place that your brain goes to when you're doing that. Are you the kind of guy who's thinking like a chess player, 4 moves ahead of where you're going, or is it kind of your brain turns off and it's a feel thing? Is it like, I know that's a really tough question to ask, but I always love learning about how people think about the guitar, especially when they're playing and, when they're known for improv.
Uh, I think it depends on the context.
Okay.
I think if it's, you're playing just a 16 bar solo or an 8 bar solo, you may, I would tend to think a whole lot differently than I would if I'm on a jazz gig or something.
Sure.
Playing something where I'm going to blow 4 choruses on a standard or whatever,
Right.
or,
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
I probably would do less than 4 choruses, but I mean, on a blues, you might go a little longer or something, but I think a lot of it depends on the context. If you're
Definitely.
soloing just over a short thing, like a lot of times if I'm on a recording session or something, I'll try to think of something, melodic.
Yeah.
Unless I have, a little time and only have time to blow 1 or 2 solos real quick and move on. A lot of times I'll try to think of a melody or some kind of solo that, is more part of the song than just, okay, here's a guy blowing a solo and okay, we're off to the lyrics
Sure.
again.
Sure. Yeah.
Try, kind of like the way the Eagles and people like that did. Their solos are, you got to play their solos if you're in the cover band. You know,
Yeah.
right.
Right.
So, so I would think more like that. But like if I'm like playing on a jazz gig or something like that, if the chord changes, you like what I guess a good question is you're kind of asking like what am I thinking of or what's my brain process
Right. Where
when
your
I'm
brain kind of goes.
Yeah, I think a lot of times I have found that if I sing along with what I'm doing, it changes everything. You instantly, even if it's kind of like the same thing. It's the exact same thing that Oscar Peterson and Errol Garner did when they were playing piano.
Yeah.
And they're not like singing the exact notes, but they're just kind of grunting and moaning and kind of sort of singing along, with what they're doing. And I found that when you connect your voice to what you're doing,
Right.
as long as you don't
George
do it,
Benson.
as long as you don't do it too loud where it becomes annoying to the audience. But you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah,
definitely. I don't know if have you ever done that?
I
Found yourself
do.
doing that?
That's actually something that I've been working on a lot more recently, and it's one of the reasons that I asked the question is because that's a technique along with a couple others that I'm trying to use to improve my own soloing. Yep.
Yeah, and I think I think it's when you connect your voice to the instrument, even if you're not singing the exact notes.
Sure.
All of a sudden, it's like that part of your emotional inner self becomes immediately connected with what you're doing, and you become more present with what you're doing. And it's not like I'm thinking of,
Right.
3 other things while I'm playing.
Definitely.
So that it's been something that's kind of helped me a lot. But also, I am thinking ahead. I think consciously and sometimes unconsciously about where I'm going with the chords.
Sure.
Sometimes I'm thinking ahead and sometimes I'm not. I'm just going for it. But really most of the time I'm just going for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody I don't really know of anybody who improvises with most everything that we improvise we've worked out in advance or to some degree. Some things, like if it's the scale you're playing or the licks that you're playing or ways to get around playing 2-5-1s or over certain kinds of common chord progressions.
Right.
But, after you've played jazz for a long time, you start to see all the common chord progressions.
Sure.
That reappear all the time.
Right.
2-5-1s in major and minor, and then all the other sort of common, chord motions that you see.
Definitely.
So that's the kind of thing, those are the kinds of things I practice over.
Cool.
Or like, I'll spend, an hour practicing over F sharp half diminished to, F minor to E minor 7 to A7 to D minor to G7, or then I'll start substituting F sharp half diminished to
yeah,
B7
yeah,
to E half diminished to A7 to D half diminished to G,
yeah,
things like that to
right,
where you're, doing those, fourth, fifth,
yeah, yeah,
resolutions,
right,
like those
right,
kinds of things, really like what I spend a lot of time doing. And, you know,
yeah,
yeah, and you can't do that if you don't know the neck of your guitar.
right,
If you don't know what
right,
all your scales are
right,
and your arpeggios and all that, if you don't
right,
know where it is in all 12 keys, then you can't be free when you improvise. So all of
sure,
those things kind of put together. So I did spend a lot of time in my youth, practicing those things. Like, okay,
yeah,
what the hell's a augmented chord? How do I play over that? And if you
right,
don't know certain things,
right, right,
melodic minor and harmonic minor scales and all that kind of stuff and whole
yep.
tone scales and
It shows if you don't know, right,
no, right.
yeah,
And and the arpeggiations and all that, you got to know all those things,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So yeah, so the more you know, the more freedom you have.
very cool. So, kind of getting back on track with the questions here, going back to the business stuff a little bit. We've touched on this a little so far, but you are, I think, equally in demand as a session player, as a live performing artist, both on guitar and on harmonica, and as a sideman in those instruments as well. And I just wanted to know kind of how, again, during a normal period of time, how your schedule might be split with doing all of that sort of stuff. Do you find that you are spending more time doing live performances now that shows are coming back? Or are you doing more studio work? And on which instrument do you find that you're more in demand or that you enjoy doing as well?
Well, it's really, I mean, I guess I'm very lucky, and I consider luck to be a whole big part of this whole
Okay.
you know being in the music,
Right.
being a musician,
Yeah.
and being blessed enough to be able to work, and
Mm-hmm.
all that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, now that things have been coming back, it's been a lot of studio work.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been quite a bit of studio work, and I'm doing live gigs. I'm doing a lot of live gigs too, but the studio work's been really very, very busy lately,
Really?
and both on harmonica and guitar.
Wonderful.
So yeah, probably about half and half.
Oh wow.
I
That's
spent
that's half and half guitar and harmonica, not half and half studio and live, right?
well, half and half guitar, for studio, just studio
Gotcha.
alone. Like half of the studio work I'm doing is on harmonica,
Oh wow.
and half of
Okay.
it is on guitar. Where it used to be more when I first moved to town here, people found out very quickly that I played harmonica, and that I was a good harmonica player.
Mm-hmm.
But it was always kind of like, well, I'd have one with me, and I'd whip one out on a session. Yeah, you want to solo one? That sure, whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
and and but now it's gotten to be where people really seem to call me quite a bit just for harmonica
Wow.
stuff. So, but guitar too, and like this week I'm working all this week playing guitar
Yeah.
and sessions, and so yeah, so it's kind
Okay.
of a split between the two, but
Do you,
the live gigs, yeah, there's live
yeah.
gigs too. I play every Saturday down at the Acme Feed and Seed
Mm-hmm.
with a
Yeah.
fantastic singer named
Yeah.
Charles Wig Walker. He's
Mm-hmm.
a real living legend soul singer
Yeah.
from he just turned 81 years old and
Right.
still singing so good. I can't believe it. And yeah, and we've had this band, Charles Treadway and Pete Abbott and myself, B3 organ, drums, guitar, and Charles the singer, and it's a
Yeah.
great band. We've been playing pretty solid hard together for the last at least 10 years.
Wow.
So we're
Tight.
tight. I
Yeah.
mean, we've got a great thing going on, and so
That's awesome.
we're there every Saturday at the Acme for the brunch from 11:30 a.m. to 2:15,
Mm-hmm.
and then I think we'll be doing now we're going to start doing some Sundays also, Saturday
wow.
and Sunday in August and September.
Very cool.
So yeah, so we're doing that, and that's just been a fun gig, because
Yeah.
it's just fun playing with those guys,
Definitely.
and yeah, and then I just get called for all kinds of other random gigs and tours with people
Yeah.
sometimes,
Yeah.
and so.
Yeah. Do you have a personal preference as to do you just personally enjoy playing one instrument over the other or
The instruments?
yeah.
Well, you know, the certain advantage of the harmonica is its portability.
Sure.
Of course, you know.
Right. You
So
don't have to
yeah,
bring all this stuff.
right.
Yeah.
So certainly, I mean, I can
Yeah.
show up to a gig with a wad of harmonicas,
Right.
and like stand up to a mic, and
Yeah.
But I was the last time I was in a band where I was just the harmonica player
Yeah.
was probably back at least 10 years ago or so, when I was playing with Jamie Hartford and Dave Pomeroy, who you
Yeah.
said you had interviewed,
Yeah.
our buddy Dave. So yeah, I was in a band with those guys like 10 years ago. And,
Oh, wow.
And that was fun to just be the harmonica player, show
That
up
must
and
have
have
been a
an
fun
amp.
outfit.
I had
Yeah.
an amp and one of those little, had that tube rotosphere that Hughes and Kettner,
Okay, yeah,
Leslie
yeah.
thing. And God,
Right.
that thing sound great with the harmonica through it, and I'd play through that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was really fun. I got to just kind of be a horn player,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
it
The
was
whole
fun.
horn section.
Yes,
Yeah.
the whole horn section. Yeah, so that was cool.
Yeah.
But still now with different things that I do, like I also play with this band called Big Bad Rhythm with
Okay.
Andy Reese and myself.
Okay.
Andy who plays with the Time Jumpers and
Yeah.
our good friend Andy. And Brian Holland is a really great, incredible stride ragtime boogie
Okay.
woogie player, and Danny Coots playing drums, who's just fantastic.
Yeah.
And then we had Jimmy Sullivan on bass here in Nashville, and
Oh,
then
yeah.
also a guy named in San Francisco named Sam Rocha. When we go out of town, he
Okay.
plays with us, and he's a great player and singer,
Very
and
cool.
Jimmy's a great singer and player too. And so we do that band, but I play harmonica and guitar.
Yeah.
Just and I do with Charles Walker too, with Wig
Yeah.
Walker. I leave a few harmonicas on the stand and pick one up and blow a solo every now and then.
Sure.
So yeah, it's both things, and yeah.
Well-
So I just
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to ask you, I wanted to dive into the session work a little bit, because you've been doing that around Nashville for quite a long time. And I've talked to a couple other people who have made a living playing sessions. But I know that you, in particular, you have worked sessions not just for, on someone's album or something like that, but also in film. And I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about that and your experience with doing a film score or a movie soundtrack, and if that differs at all from the musician's perspective from going and doing like a label session.
Well, I've had some really cool experiences that way. I've really enjoyed doing that. Back in the mid '90s, I think the only one time that I did like a movie where I wasn't just one song or a couple little things, or I did do a movie called Dr. T and the Women, and it
Okay.
was with Lyle Lovett,
Mm-hmm.
and Lyle produced it, and
Yeah.
Robert Altman
Mm-hmm.
was the director of the, and
Sure.
guy is the guy who made the movie, the famous
Mm-hmm.
famous movie maker Robert Altman. So that was really neat, because he was there. Robert Altman was in the studio with us every day, and we were there for like, I don't know how many weeks, 5 weeks or something, in the
Wow.
studio every day working on this movie.
That was those 90s
In
budgets.
in Los Angeles. We
Yeah.
were there like at Conway Studios all day working on this movie, and that was really, really interesting and fun.
Sure.
Because we were making it all up on the spot, and we were doing it the old-fashioned way, where we would just look at the screen
Yeah.
and play to it.
Wow.
And like,
Yeah.
I mean, some things improvised, but we worked out, we did a whole bunch of pre-production where we wrote the music and
That's so
worked
cool.
out everything in advance.
Yeah.
But we would have to do work out the timing just by, we'd play and we go, oh, we got to take
Right.
a few beats off of that,
Right.
and like just, and so, that was really an incredible experience, because that
Yeah.
was, a whole band in the studio at the same
Right.
time playing, and some overdubbing and playing to the screen, which was
Sure.
incredible, and getting to work with these amazing people, and
Right. I'm sure
and
that.
so that was Lyle's band at the time.
Very
you
cool.
know, it was all in there with Stuart Duncan
Yeah.
and a bunch of great players.
Sure.
Yeah, and
yeah.
so we did that, and then I've done several things where it's just a couple of few songs on it. that one particular instance where we did that
Mm-hmm.
movie with Robert Altman was, it was really just like doing a session,
Really?
in a lot of
Okay.
ways. Yeah, it was just, you was in the studio with great session guys, and it was really like doing that in a way. But now I've been working a lot with George Massenberg,
Okay.
the
Mm-hmm.
great uh, engineer and
Mm-hmm.
producer, and he he's been incredible to work with. Him and a friend named Don Chirell, who does the music for the Geico commercials.
Oh, okay.
And Don shoots a lot of the commercials for
Mm-hmm.
them, and he's been getting me to do the music for it.
Okay.
And so a lot of times that is me and George and Don getting together at his house.
Mm-hmm.
They fly me out to their place, and I go there and I'll write the music.
Yeah.
And sometimes play everything.
Wow.
Drums, bass, guitar, and
Yeah.
harmonica
Yeah.
and everything.
Yeah.
Or we'll, have our friend Pete Abbott come out with us, who's the
Okay.
guy who plays with Charles Walker. He'll
Mm-hmm.
come out with us, and we'll track it with just me and Pete,
Okay.
and then I'll play bass. But see, these are like 30 to 60-second long spots.
Snippets. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll write, I'll write the tune, and and
Very cool. Yeah.
maybe a lot of times it won't take long at all to write it,
Sure.
and we'll put it down and
Okay.
yeah. So there's some of those Geico commercials, if you see them, like the motorcycle ones, and
Sure.
a lot of the different ones I've done
That's very cool.
are like me playing. If you hear a
Yeah.
guitar on there, it could be me, or it's playing slide. I play a lot of slide, and
Okay.
or just if you hear harmonica, it could possibly be me. So
Sure.
yeah, so I'll do stuff like that,
Yeah.
and I've been doing those with those guys for the past 4 years or so.
Oh wow.
So, so yeah, I get little things like that here and there, where it'll be just, but those sessions are, they're super fun, just really fun,
Sure.
because I'm just hanging out with those guys, and we're eating good food and just, having a great time. So, yeah. So anyway, yeah, the difference between like maybe just doing a session with a songwriter or doing something with the film kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
it's very similar. I mean, you're
Sure.
still recording music,
Yeah. Yeah.
and but a lot of the film stuff, it's like I'm writing it,
Sure.
But yes, there will be some stipulations. Okay, we want it to be, sound like someone might play an example for me. And we want it to be kind of along the lines of something like this. So I'll write something that's like that.
Right.
And usually I'll write it in 5 minutes, or
Sure.
pick up the guitar and okay, it's done,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like something we spend super lot of time on. But
Right.
sometimes I will spend more time on it at home.
Mm-hmm.
Like we did a thing for one of those things for Geico where it was military insurance. It was insurance
Okay.
for like
Yeah. Military
soldiers.
families.
Yes.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I wrote this like sort of march,
Mm-hmm.
on the acoustic guitar,
Mhm.
that sounded, and it had like chord changes, like
Yeah,
Sousa
yeah.
type, John Philip Sousa type chord
Yeah.
changes and stuff. And so to kind of have that sort of vibe, and
Very cool.
they loved it, and they used it, and it was really cool. So yeah, I'll get that kind of thing,
Very cool.
whereas, when you're doing stuff for songwriters, you're listening to the singer and trying to play stuff that doesn't
Get in the
you
way.
step all
Yeah.
over him, and complements what they're doing, and
Sure.
all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess my follow up to that, and then we'll move on, is I never ask on this channel about specific numbers,
Hmm.
but when it comes to, let's say, a commercial that you've been asked to do the music for, is that most of the time one time cut a check and that's your payment, or are there residuals from like a commercial?
Most of the time these days, it's a buyout.
Okay.
Yep, it's like a one-time payment. It's a buyout, but I do get paid when there's a reuse.
Okay.
Like if they, run a certain thing for 6 months and they're going to use it again, I do get paid again.
Okay.
Yeah,
Very cool.
yeah.
Oh.
And if with the movie stuff and film stuff, there's several movies where I've played, like guitar on a couple of songs, or
Yeah.
or they've taken a song from somebody's record that I happen to be on, and it ended up in the movie, and I'll get paid for that, But there's like the special payments fund, through
Yeah.
the union, where
Right.
like I'll make up money every year because of
Yeah.
they keep selling the films,
Yeah. Yeah.
so that kind of thing,
For anybody who wants to learn more about that, go watch the Dave Pomeroy interview because we hit that very topic.
He's the guy.
He's the
Yeah,
guy.
Dave is the man.
Yep.
He's the man. He's done an incredible job at the union. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Well, if we could kind of move on to, I think, the live work that you do a little bit. We've talked about it quite a bit, but I did want to dive into, I guess, the nuts and bolts of, let's take your Acme Feed and Seed gig. With that group, or with the Hot Club in Nashville that you do with actually Richard Smith, who is sitting out there right now, and we're sitting in his studio right now. At the point where you are in your career, do you have band rehearsals the way that, say, me and my band get together every Sunday and have a rehearsal?
Oh, absolutely.
You do?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, always.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
And
That gig in particular with Charles Wig Walker. Pete and Charles, and Wig. We call him Wig.
Sure.
Wigg.
Two G's.
I think he got that name when he was a little baby. Maybe he was born with a full head of hair or something. I can't remember, something like that. But
Right.
anyway, yes, we absolutely rehearse. We were rehearsing during the COVID.
Really?
We didn't have that many gigs. We were doing some gigs, but we'd still rehearse.
Yeah.
Just to keep ourselves going.
Tight,
but we do rehearse, and
Very
every
cool.
now and then we'll go stretches where we won't rehearse, and then we're like, okay,
Yeah.
we're starting to like fall back playing the same tunes, even though we
Right.
know tons of songs.
Sure.
But we won't play them for a while, and then we'll forget them. We're like, okay, we got to brush up on that. But
Yeah.
rehearsing is I think it's extremely important. And I've been in a lot of situations where guys don't want to rehearse.
Yeah.
And
It makes a difference.
it's just not as
Yeah.
it's like, okay, we all know how to jam.
Yeah.
And I love to jam, and I'd love
Sure.
just to go out on a limb, but after a while it's like, okay,
Right.
this is not sustainable. I think it could be sustainable if you were like out on the road night after night after night after night,
Right.
or something like that. But when you're
Sure.
not playing all the time,
With the same people.
yeah,
Definitely.
But so I think it's important.
Very cool. Well, I'm gonna kind of shift gears now, and with this interview series, we don't dive into necessarily the how you got started story, because I do think that that's covered very, very well in other interviews, and other people do that way better than me. But I did want to ask you, because it does tie into your career, about kind of the way that you got to Nashville and what that looked like for you when you arrived. Because I think that your story, with Chet Atkins being an influence on not just your playing, but also your path here, I think is very interesting. So could you just kind of tell us very briefly about, I know that you, for years, were establishing yourself as a musician in New York. So maybe let's start there and talk about the transition and what brought you to Nashville.
Well, yeah, I spent 10 years out in New York.
Yeah.
And I went to University of Illinois, and then I finished college at William Patterson University in New Jersey, right outside of Manhattan. And I went out there because I was living in Illinois, and I was getting like, okay, I live in Champaign, Illinois. This is in a cornfield in the middle of nowhere. It's an incredible school, but I'm,
Right.
If I don't leave here,
Yeah.
I mean,
You
not that.
You'll never leave here.
Yeah, no, and and it's not that nothing wrong with being there, or I could have found something to do there, but I just didn't want to stay there.
Sure.
And a friend of mine was going to school in William Patterson and told me about the college, and so I checked it out and auditioned and got in school there and moved out there. Didn't really know anybody except for my buddy out there. I knew a few people, but not very many. So
Sure.
So I finished college out there, and I stayed out there, and I wanted to be a jazz musician. I was, William Patterson was a jazz school, and I'm so glad I went there because it's amazing it's an amazing school.
Okay.
It was so good for me, and the musicians that I played with and studied, teachers that I studied with, and for that 2 years or so that I was there,
Yeah. Yeah.
was just an incredible experience, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. But living in New York living out there was, to make a living playing
Yeah.
was just, I just didn't know how to navigate it. I
Sure.
grew up in 40 miles west of Chicago, out in the cornfields out there,
Yeah.
and in a small town, and I wasn't a New York City guy, although I really enjoyed being there, and
Sure. Yeah.
made the greatest friends, and
Yeah.
and got to hear the greatest musicians. I spent all my money going out to the jazz clubs,
Yeah.
literally,
Yeah.
really, like 3 nights a week, going
Wow.
to the Village Vanguard and
Yeah.
places like that, and hearing the greatest of the greatest. And a lot of the great um, jazz guys, who invented the music, were still alive back in the 1980s when I
Sure.
was there.
Yeah.
So I got to hear everybody. I mean, really.
Wow.
I mean, the only guy I didn't really get to hear was Sonny Rollins, one of my all-time favorite
Okay.
musicians.
Yeah.
Never got to hear Sonny. Almost did when he came to Nashville, but the last time. But
Wow.
but I got to hear everyone.
Yeah.
And so being in New York was more difficult, just to make a living. I was playing weddings and bar mitzvahs on the weekends to make a
Sure.
living, and just
Been there. Yeah.
yeah, you done that. and it was very, very, very good for me.
Yeah.
At the time, you don't really know how good it is for you. You're just
Yeah.
like, oh, God, I got to drive to Connecticut again, It's 3 in the afternoon. The gig
Right.
starts at 8. I guess it's time to leave,
Right.
even though it takes,
Right.
you know,
Gonna eat fast food.
an
on the
hour and a
way
half to get there.
Yeah.
It could take you 4 hours to get
Right.
there, and so,
Right.
and I was living in Brooklyn for 6 years, and I
Oh,
think
wow.
in
Okay.
3 or 4 years in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest of the time I was in Jersey, right outside of
Yeah.
New York. And
Yep.
I was driving into New York. And so, yeah, that's what I was doing before I came here, and I was, I was doing recording sessions, but most of the sessions I was doing were overdubs.
Yeah.
I wasn't tracking with a band.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sometimes, but not that often.
Right.
Every now and then I'd do something where we would track the whole thing, but a lot of times it was just doing overdubs, or I did a lot of commercials and jingles on harmonica
Right.
and guitar there. The last about 4 years I lived there, and
Sure.
then weddings on the weekends, and then jazz gigs that paid no money during the
Right.
week.
Yeah.
And other stuff. I played with blues bands and rock bands and stuff. I did everything.
Very
you know,
cool.
and then I was
Yeah.
teaching at the National Guitar Summer Workshop
Mm-hmm.
in the summer, which was a pivotal
Mm-hmm.
situation for me,
Very
because
cool.
I met these amazing players, and that kind of a roundabout way. That's how I met Chet Atkins, was through Robert Lee Castleman, who was working there at the camp, who introduced me to him and all that, and John Knowles,
Mm-hmm.
and so, who was also teaching with me at the camp.
Oh, wow.
We go way back,
Yeah.
till mid '80s since I've known John, and so. Yeah. So my New York experience was that, playing
Sure.
sessions and driving around in a piece of shit car, spending every last bit of money that I, started to get
Yeah.
ahead,
Yeah.
I'd get $500 in the bank and think I was rich, and then all of a sudden there it goes into fixing my piece of shit car. That's
Sure.
like being in your 20s,
Yeah. Right.
So,
right,
yeah.
Yeah. Well,
So that's what it was like for me before I got here,
Mm-hmm.
and then when I came here I moved here in February of '93,
Sure.
and that was to work with Chet, and
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
convinced me to move here in a sort of roundabout way, and started playing in his band and all that, and
Yeah.
that was incredible. And but when I got here, I was pretty green.
Yeah.
Even though I
Sure.
was I was a good guitar player. Obviously, I must have been a good guitar player.
Right.
But I didn't know shit about what I was doing, really, in so many ways.
Sure.
I just
Sure. Yeah.
when I got here and saw the level of guys like session guys like Brent Mason,
Yeah.
and guys
Yeah.
like that, and and I ended up being on sessions with these guys.
Yeah.
Like right when I got to town, I was like, oh my God, like there's a whole different
Yeah.
Doing overdubs
Right.
is way different than tracking with a band with guys at that level, and they're like, it was terrifying, absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
But you know, after a while, you know, you start getting experience, and it got easier and easier. But at first, yeah, it was. And it was incredible how nice everybody was to me. The session guys were just really, really nice to me. You know, they were
Sure.
supportive, and thank God for that.
Um, let me kind of cut in real quick and just so that the audience that's watching at home understands. Can you explain the difference between an overdubbing session and a live band session? And is that a the follow up would be, is that a stylistic difference between the way records are made in New York versus Nashville, or is that more of a maybe a demo versus an album release type of approach to recording?
Um, well, my experience in, in New York, there were definitely,
Live
people
band.
yeah, there was
Right.
people doing that. There were
Right.
definitely people doing that,
Right.
know. But yeah, I didn't see as much of that world. You
Sure.
know, most of the things I was doing were just, put a guitar part on here, put a harmonica part on here, or whatever,
Right.
things that
Right.
were already done, or maybe some stuff that was programmed, like, and but when I got to Nashville, people were, it was, you'd show up to a recording session. There's a steel player and another guitar
Right.
player and a bass player and a drummer and a keyboard player, and
Yeah.
and like go in there now, make it sound good,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
play the perfect part right now,
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it doesn't always have to be perfect, and of course, people would fix their parts if they made a mistake or whatever.
Sure.
That was all good, but usually it was the level of musicianships was so
Right.
great that it was like, okay, a couple few passes and it's done.
Yeah.
And it's and so yeah, that was, to me. Does that answer your question?
It
Yeah,
does. It does.
that was the
Yeah.
difference. Just the you know uh, being so seasoned and experienced,
Sure.
that way, to where you're like the confidence and the being relaxed when the green light
Sure.
red light
Right,
goes on
right.
or whatever,
So you don't get red light syndrome.
yeah,
Yeah.
and all that. So,
Right. Well,
yeah. So
Yeah.
that was really a lot of the difference, with that. And,
Sure. Well, that kind of answers the next question, but just kind of wrapping up a little bit. Talking about things that you didn't know when you came to this town. You said you didn't know shit, that you were pretty inexperienced with quite a bit. Someone coming to Nashville today, someone in their 20s who might be a great guitar player but doesn't know anybody in this town, what would you say to them about, hey, you need to focus on this, or you need to work on this, or what's the advice to someone like that? I know that's a loaded question.
Well, no, it's a good question. I don't know if I can answer it based on what's going on now.
Now, right.
Because
Right.
after I've been here for so many years, I'm kind of in my
Sure.
my own world with the
Right.
people that I know, and we kind of make our relationships with all the people that we work with, and praise the Lord that people want to hire you back,
Right.
and but nowadays I would say, from my experience, from my personal experience, it would be yeah, my experience is like, get really good on your instrument.
Sure.
First. Really, it's really just spend all your time when you're young practicing and getting really, really good on and proficient on your instrument in as many styles as you possibly can.
Sure.
And do the stuff you like to play.
Yeah.
Of course. You know, play the music that you like.
Yeah. Yeah.
To try, but to have a hand in a lot of different styles.
Okay.
And practice with a metronome always.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be the thing. Like, if you want to do session work, that's going to be what's going to separate the men from the boys. If you don't practice with the metronome, you don't have a good groove or a good feel too.
Yeah.
It's the feel. It's not just being metronomic and just playing on the beat. You know,
Right.
it has to feel good and it has to be, you know, every musician, the way that they groove has a different feel than others. But, you know, if you can learn a lot of different feels,
Yeah.
you know, playing behind the beat, playing in front of the beat, playing on the beat, you know,
Yeah.
working with that metronome to where you own it,
Yeah.
you know, where it's like, okay, I'm going to stomp all over you, Mr. Metronome. You know, at first it's like,
Right.
wow, this thing is speeding up. It's slowing
Right.
down, you know, and
Right.
it's
It
not.
stomps all over you.
Right.
Right.
You know, you got to turn that around to where, you know, okay, no, you will obey.
Right.
Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, so,
Right.
yeah.
Whether
So,
you're at 60 or 260.
right,
Right.
right. You know, and I'm still working on that. And that's always the first thing I go to. And I know Richard Smith is, and
Yeah.
I've talked about this a lot. You know, he tells
Oh,
his
yeah.
students that also it's like if you can't play in the pocket and you can't play in the groove on a session, that's it.
Then you can't play.
It's
Yeah.
everything.
Right.
Your rhythm, your sense of rhythm is first.
Yep.
You know, and I started on drums, you know, so I think I may have an
Foundation.
advantage that
Yeah.
way, you know, and I really look at the guitar as it is a percussion instrument.
Okay.
You know, I mean, this right here,
Yeah.
you know, when you're playing, like, especially like when you're playing that hot club stuff, if you're
Yeah.
playing like you know, the rhythm parts, you know, there's a whole lot of different feels that you can do
Yeah.
with your right hand when you're playing rhythm, right? When
Oh,
you're
yeah.
playing the funk
Yeah.
or rock or whatever, it's all like this, you know,
Yeah.
it's all rhythm,
Right.
you know. So
Yeah.
yeah, how long you hold a note, how short you play it,
Right.
you know, dynamics and articulation, and
Yeah.
all that is all part of it. But it's got to be in the pocket.
Yeah.
So I would say to young musicians who are first moving here, yeah, that's what you got to do first.
Very cool.
And those are the guys who people are gonna hear and go, okay, it doesn't matter if that guy's playing fast and fancy.
Yeah.
You know, what does it feel like? What's his groove like? And your
Yeah.
tone, you know, your sound.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even if you're an acoustic guitar player, you know, and you go up on stage and you've got this crappy piezo mic and you're plugging directly into PA and you're not paying attention
Yeah.
to what your guitar sounds like. It's like, oh,
Right.
I mean, you could have the most greatest voice in the world, but somebody could walk in there and go, something's wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's the tone of the guitar is like hurting their ears, you know,
Yeah.
stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
You know, and same with if you play electric guitar, you got to spend time like paying attention to what your sound is like,
Sure.
you know, and all that kind of stuff, as well as your rhythm. So that first.
Okay.
But then see, as far as like, you know, getting to know people and, you know, and all that,
Networking,
that's where I
yeah.
think things may differ for me than now, but it might be the same, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it was like when I first got to town, yeah, I was working with Chet Atkins, but that didn't really mean anything because, yeah, there's all these other guys been in town for 30 years doing
Sure.
sessions or whatever. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, this new kid's moved to town and he's working with Chet. Great. Okay.
Right.
Can he play on a session?
Yeah.
Let's put him on a session and find out. You know what I mean?
Sure. Sure.
And so, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's, you know, but if you're a young person and you're really talented and you've, you know, got the right demeanor and disposition or however you want to put it, personality or whatever, that, you know, you're not, you know, overly cocky or whatever, where you turn
Sure.
people off or whatever,
Yeah.
you know, and people like you and you're personable and you're good to people and you show up on time,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
All great advice.
show up on time. You know, if they say, you know, be there at so and so, be there.
Yeah.
You know, go to the rehearsals. You know. I mean, I would do stuff. You know, I did $50 gigs and do whatever. I would take a lot of gigs. Like, you know,
Yeah.
when I first got here, I would, you know, play on songwriter nights with people. I would back up songwriters. You know, and
Sure.
but see, back then, I don't know. I don't know if the scene is the same here now. Because like back then in the 80s, there were tons of studios down on Music Row where
Yeah.
people were doing demos all the time, and you
Yeah.
could always get on a demo session, and there was so many artists signed to labels, and they were all looking for songs, and
Yeah.
it was a whole different world than now. So I don't know. I would guess now, you know, the gigs are down on Broadway, I guess, and then there's stuff
Yeah.
elsewhere, and then there's touring gigs.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, being nice to everybody, you know, that you meet, and musicians and whoever, you know, and
Yeah. I think that's
just
all
doing,
great advice.
yeah, just doing that, because you never know who you're going to end up working with. I mean, I'm still working with the same people I met the day I moved to town.
Wow.
These people I've made relationships with, I'm still working with them. And yeah, and I'm still friends with, people that I met when I was first here that I, still play with, still things going on with them. They need once or twice a year, they need me to play on a record, or do an overdub on a couple songs, or it could be anything, or give their kids guitar lessons, or whatever, it could be anything.
Yeah.
So it's all just making relationships,
Very cool.
with other musicians, and but first of all, you got to be able to play, and you don't have to be able to, like,
burn it down.
yeah, you don't have to be the fanciest picker in town, But of course, that always helps too.
That helps, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and and it depends also on what you're wanting to do. For me, when I first got here, I was just so glad to be doing something besides weddings and bar mitzvahs that I,
Right. Yeah.
But I was getting to tour with Chet Atkins and Shelby Lynn and
Yeah.
Lyle Lovett and Susie Vargas
Some dream-
and people,
dream gigs,
all
yeah.
these great people, and and so yeah, so I mean that, and I just considered that to be incredibly a real blessing,
Sure,
and
yeah.
so let me think if there's anything else I'm leaving out as far as that goes. I really just
Well,
networking with people, going out to hear people play,
Yeah.
and just telling people you're a musician, and and I think I've always said this to people too, and I think I've heard a lot of other people say this too. If you have any talent here, if you just stick around and don't get too discouraged, and just stick around for a while, and have some faith that you will get somewhere.
Yeah.
And just put in the time, and if you want to be here, eventually it'll probably happen.
Well, I think you probably won't be surprised to hear that you're not the only person who has ended the interview saying stick around.
Really?
That seems to be one of the biggest pieces of advice that people give.
Yeah.
So,
well, it could be also get in line.
right.
Get at the end of the line and just wait till your
Wait
turn.
your turn, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Chet Atkins would say, heard him say several times, well, be careful what you wish for.
You know what? Let's. I think that's a great piece of advice to end on. Be careful what you wish for. Pat, thank you so much for doing this. Do you want to play a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, we can play a little bit.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.